everyone. Welcome to another dire episode of ARG Presents. I am Evil Aaron, joined this week by a man who comes straight from the pit of eternal darkness. I give you a man who walks hand in hand through the forest of evil with Lucifer himself, the BRENT.
You know, Mom and Dad tried to warn everybody by making my initials BAD, but they didn't listen.
You got that right, buddy. Boy, and you lived up to that. That's for darn sure. So, if you joined us last week, and some of you did, we spun the wheel, we made the deal. And this week, Brent, I'm excited about this one, we'll be playing games where you are the bad guy in the game. Now, this is an interesting topic. I believe this was a chat choice last week, Brent, as I recall. This was not on the wheel,
correct.
so that makes it more exciting for me because I like the idea. It's a very clever. Our listeners are very clever people. So, Brent, what do you think about games where you play as the villain, the heel? Is this a look that you like? Do you like being the bad guy in games?
I actually prefer to be a neutral character, not overly good, not overly bad. But when push comes to shove, I prefer to be kind of the underhanded player. However, there are games where I've actually been disturbed by being the bad guy. Like, it was actually so much that I didn't like it.
Really? Like what?
Yes.
Let's throw out some examples here, Brenny.
Well, in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 2, there's a level called Remember No Russian, where you play as a terrorist, and you go through and you shoot up an airport. And before the level, they even have a disclaimer. It's like, listen, this is like disturbing crap. If you don't want to play this level, you can just skip it, and you'll still get all the achievements. You'll still get all of the, bonuses. It's all good. Just skip it right now. And I was just like, nah, click it. And the first time I played it, I refused to shoot anyone. Like, I tried to shoot the bad guys. I was like, I didn't want to be that bad. And, I failed the mission, and I went through. And then I was just like, okay, I'm just not going to shoot anybody. And that actually worked. Like, I was shooting above their heads because I didn't want to, it was weird. So that was one time vividly in my mind that being the bad guy was too much. I didn't want to do it. Too much.
I understand from a philosophical perspective where you would be worried about such a thing. However, I often revel in being the bad guy or the heel. In some games, when you talk about a game like a war type game, often they're really both sort of bad guys in a way. I mean, if you're out there sniping another dude, you're probably not that good. You know what I mean? Even if you're fighting for the forces of good, in your opinion, you're still killing a sucker. So it could be.
Well, good and bad is often a perspective thing. So right. When you've got that kind of stuff going on,
when it's funny when this category first came up. I thought of a game where you're technically, I don't think you're the bad guy, but there's a game on the Amiga called Walker, where you drive a huge mech, and all you do is mow down wave after wave of soldiers on foot with your mech, with your automatic machine gun. I just love that game. It's one of my favorite stress relievers. I know the boat hates it, but I love it. I love the play mechanic of just mowing down guys on the ground, but I mean, or stomping them. But that not a nice thing to do. We talked about City of Heroes quite a bit, the online game. They released an expansion for it called City of Villains, where you make up your own villains and play from the bad guy side. And I'll have to say, I've only recently warmed up to it, but that's another one that sprung forth in my mind when we talked about games where you play the bad guy. Another one that's very prevalent was a game which I threw in some footage here called the Dungeon Keeper series, where you actually run an evil dungeon and you've got lackeys and flunkies that you smack around to get to do what you want, and then you also try to kill the people that come in to steal your money. I always thought that was a pretty kind of a neat angle or slant. What other bad guy games that spring into your mind, Brent?
Of course, one of the most profitable games out there, Grand Theft Auto,
Oh,
where
absolutely, yeah.
you're you're the bad guy, and that stuff, along with like Dungeon Keeper and City of Heroes, where you're playing. Well, like GTA is not a comically evil guy, but it's still, you know, more, I don't, laid back evil. It's more acceptable evil. You're just going around, you're killing people, you're robbing them, you're trying to take over things. That's like that's the acceptable evil. And then you've also got games. Some of our chat was mentioning, like the Buck Hunter series, where you're just a hunter out there trophy killing like wild and exotic animals.
I never would have thought of
I could
that.
definitely see where people would, you're sort of the bad guy in that, because I mean you're not doing it for any kind of conservation or for the meat or anything. Like, you're just going out there and trophy hunting, which I know some people, that's their thing. And then there's a lot of games that ride that line. For example, Black and White, where you can either be a helpful and glorious godlike figure, or you could just beat your guys into submission. Anytime they do wrong, throw them in a volcano, or wrath of plagues. So you've got, I think there are typically more you can play as the bad guy than there are just you are an evil game or an evil guy. Someone else mentioned in chat a Spectrum / Amstrad / Commodore game called Jack the Nipper.
Oh yes,
Where
yeah, we played that, and you play a little jerk, as I recall. So that, that is a really, even like the school days and that way, you could sort of do bad things, and you could sort of be a jerk. Did you ever play Bully? Although it sort of, you eventually aren't a jerk, but that one you sort of start out as a jerk.
Yeah, well, Bully is more of a heart of gold type guy, where
Yeah.
the rough exterior, but as you play the game, you're actually a pretty decent guy.
Well, or you could be a jerk if you want to be.
Yeah.
Some games will let you play two players as the jerk or evil. I'll go with like an Archon, and everyone likes to play the black side in Archon. Ain't nobody wants to play the light side, because you get the cooler characters on the evil side of that one. So that's one that springs forth. Someone I saw mention Knights of the Old Republic, a game where we played the online game of that. And
Well, I'm going to talk about that later, so we'll save
that's gonna
that.
be coming up. So
Yeah.
we'll skip. We'll let you. I don't want to steal your thunder on that one. Speaking of thunder, we've got a lovely rain coming down here at Amigos Studios. So if you hear any weird binging, that's what that is. Well, I think that's an interesting cross section of games, and we've picked a couple decent ones, Brent. I think I'm going to let you start the show this time around, and hopefully this rain will kick off. What did you bring to the table this week? Now, the rules for this were pretty simple. There were no system limitations or year limitations. We could pick from anything we wanted to throughout time and space, Brandon. You picked it. You picked what I think's a winner. What do you got this week?
I picked Star Wars TIE Fighter. And for those that are not familiar, this is a Star Wars game back in the 90s. TIE Fighter was actually released in 94. And it's part of a X-Wing series. The first game of this is you played the good guys. You played the rebels, and you fought against tyranny and tried to beat back the Empire. Whereas in TIE Fighter, you play the Empire, which is often looked at, and even more so in the Disney era, glorified as the bad guys. You're trying to rule the galaxy with an iron fist. And in TIE Fighter, you take control of a TIE Fighter, and you run missions for the Empire. And you get in there, and the Empire guy says, go and do this, and you go and you do that. And it's great. This is one of the greatest build-ups of you're the bad guy starting that I've ever seen. Because anyone who knows anything about Star Wars, and if you don't, just a real quick crash course, in the Empire, you're expendable. No one starts out as being the super stud. You're just garbage. So when you start out, you are in an unshielded TIE fighter, and you have to prove yourself. And if you go out there and you get killed, the game lets you try again. But the Empire doesn't care if you live or die. Pilots are expendable. Ships are expendable. It makes more sense from the Empire's perspective for you to go out there and run into something and blow it up, or just be part of the swarm, part of the numbers game. Because they've got all the resources they want. They'll just keep sending ship after ship. And as the game progresses and you prove yourself, they're like, okay, now this is a pilot that needs a little bit more. So they start giving you ships with shields, and they start giving you different armaments you can go in. And TIE Fighter kind of walks the line. Yes, you're playing as the Empire, and the Empire is viewed in an evil light. But they mostly have you fighting pirates, the people that are evil for both sides. Now, you do go and run rebel missions too, and there's infighting where you actually battle your own people. But TIE Fighter did something back in the day. This was, one of the few games where you play as the definitive bad guy. And it does so in some of the most remarkable space sim flight simulator stuff that has ever been done. It is detailed and it is precise. The movement and stuff feels excellent. Once you get to a point where you're in the later levels, when you're in a more substantial ship, you get to divert powers to your shields or your engines. You can set up what kind of armaments you have. And you're in space. So you've got full 360 flight movement. You could go anywhere you want. You can just stop dead in space and turn if you wanted. And it's all done so well. And another thing TIE Fighter really does well is when you start the game, if you go through the tutorials as you're supposed to, it tells you every single thing you need to know how to do. It tells you how to target. It tells you how to scan. It tells you how to look to your left and your right and your up and your down. And it allows the player to learn these things as they go, which makes the game so much more enjoyable. Because you don't feel like you've just been thrown into something. You feel like you're a pilot that's being trained and learning how to fly these things. I thought they did a really great job with that. What did you think?
I agree. And the funny thing is, you have to learn some of the more mundane aspects. Who'd have thought that?
Absolutely.
Who would think that, like, flying around a spaceship it's almost like an administrative duties of checking cargo, because at first you do the lamer stuff, and so you have to learn how to do the lamer stuff. But yeah, they do a good job. I didn't feel when I started this, and it'd been a good while since I played this, but I felt pretty comfortable pretty quick with everything. But like I said, you're right. I mean, they do give you the feeling that, like, yeah, you're a scrub, and it makes you wonder what the guys that, like, if you remember in Star Wars, the two guys that were like flying on Darth's wing. Or some of the cooler guys, what did they have to go through to get to that level of awesomeness?
Absolutely.
And even those guys end up being expendable, pretty expendable. So you're right. You're not special. That's for darn sure. And the TIE Fighter is not what I would call a durable item. So
absolutely
you
not.
don't want to go in there wing. You're not going to be a cowboy going there wing ding with a TIE Fighter. You won't be around real long.
And this game has proven itself to be a fan favorite. Like I said, it was released in '94, but it has gotten several updates. It got expansion packs that added more missions. It got re-released twice. Once on its own as a CD collection, and then once as a as the whole X-Wing series collection. And they didn't just slap it in a new box and put it on a shelf. They upgraded the graphics. They updated the music. They updated the sound to take better use of CD technology. They took it off of the DOS platform where it started and moved it to the Windows 95 platform, where probably the best release of it is. And it is a game that really, even today, I picked this up. If you're watching this live or the day of release, you can go buy the special edition of TIE Fighter, which gives you all the extra mission packs, on Steam for less than $4 American. That is an absolute steal, and you owe it to yourself to do that, because it gives you the best version with the highest resolution, which unfortunately is still only 640 by 480. But the game's graphics, not only were they phenomenal for the time, I mean, mind-blowing for the time, they are still good enough to play today because of how everything gets presented to you. The sound on this is good. The music is absolutely glorious, because the Emperor's March and stuff in the Star Wars games was meant to sound evil, and it has those evil undertones. But this, you're kind of playing as the good guy. I mean, from their perspective, right? So all of the music has more higher tones, more upbeat, so it's less ominous and less menacing. I thought that was really well done. And then they even go as far as to, there are tragedies in the game as you go along, and, you have the Empire kind of infighting, and it's a neat perspective to see that as, because then you're the good guy as the Empire fighting the bad guy as the Empire, which games rarely do that. Have you as the bad guy, but on the good side of the bad guys. Really enjoyed the game. I know this is a fan favorite, and the reviews at the time really let that stand out. This has won multiple awards from different magazines. Most notable is IGN ranked it as the second highest PC game of all time in 2009. So over a decade after its initial release, it's still pulling in awards like that. Now, a little bit of trivia for you, Aaron. 2 bits of trivia for you. Do you know if this game won Game of the Year the year it was released in 1994?
Oh boy, I'm trying to think of what came out that year. This certainly would have been in contention. That's for darn sure. I'm guessing, though, by your question, it did not.
Correct. It actually came in second to Doom. So if you got to lose, that's a pretty good one to lose to.
Yeah. Although, and you can see that Doom was such a graphically such a step forward. Although so is this in a lot of ways, but this was an improvement where Doom was like a whole new, really blow-away genre that really jumped far away from, say, Wolfenstein, for example. So I can understand that you're right. That if you're going to lose, that's the one.
Yeah, and that it's it actually had lost a few in a few different categories. The Game of the Year, Wing Commander 3 beat it out as Action Game of the Year, and UFO Enemy Unknown won its category over TIE Fighter. So it played a whole lot of second place, but it was second place for so many different categories even. I think really is a testimony to how glorious and how well built and how well playing this game truly is.
This game, I'll tell you something. When X-Wing came out, I had my Amiga, and I was desperate to get this X-Wing for the Amiga. I was dying. I was waiting for it to come out. And I've mentioned before, but that's when I knew I was done with the Amiga, unfortunately, because I remember this guy told me he had the beta release of X-Wing for the Amiga, and I was so excited. And I went to his house, and he wanted a ton of software for it. And I was copying software for him. And so we were getting towards the end of the day. I'm like, okay, man, break out the X-Wing. And he's like, well, I don't know where it's at, man. I got to go. And he screwed me. He purposely screwed me. I'll never forget that. But I wanted X-Wing so bad, and I played it eventually on my old Tandy, but this thing was out of its league. And then when this came out, because I thought X-Wing was awesome, and this blew X-Wing out of the water. Graphically, like control-wise, the AI, the enemies are smart in this. I like the fact something you can do in this that you could target individual parts of ships, so you could target like engines or shields. I love that aspect of it. These games did a great job of simulating what it'd be like to take one of these small craft and fly over these large capital ships. And like, I mean, if you remember the opening scene in Star Wars when that Star Destroyer comes over, this big massive thing, it was so impressive at the time. And when this came out, when you had the ability in these games to zoom over these ships, it was just so awesome. I remember just loving that. I thought the missions in this were clever because you start out, like I said, with these more administrative tasks, and then sometimes those will devolve into something where, like a chase or a defense mission. And when you get the better ships, there's some awesome ships you can get in this. You get bombers, you get all the stuff with shields, and it really they really do a good job of moving the story along. You talked about Wing Commander 3 coming out and doing well that year. And this game and Wing Commander are very similar in the way that they have this cool presentation. Wing Commander does a little better job in terms of making you feel like a pilot. But I mean, it's a different type of story too, because Wing Commander is a game where you're the hero and you're fighting evil. So it's a little bit more difficult to like get you to embrace ultimate evil by showing these little. It's easier to do Wing Commander, I guess what I'm saying. But Empire does a good job of getting you into the sort of the mix to feel like you're part of this, this huge space government. That and like you said, there's stuff going on in there, and you've got to pick sides. They did a great job with that. But one place that this crushes Wing Commander is the actual space part. Wing Commander does a good job. Don't get me wrong, the Wing Commander series improved dramatically over the years when it comes to getting the space part right. But this crushed any of the Wing Commanders from back then. This had much better, in my opinion, much better space combat. The ships were cooler, and I like this one more, the space aspect. And eventually, you got X-Wing versus TIE Fighter when that came out, and that was a pretty big deal too. But this is probably of the three titles, this is probably the best one, in my opinion. Now, I have to say, it's been a long time since I played X-Wing versus Street Fighter. X-Wing versus TIE Fighter. X-Wing versus Street Fighter wouldn't go too good for the Street Fighter. But I will say that I enjoyed going back and fooling with this. The controls are great. I know it's available on for updated versions of this, which shows you how popular it is. It's been modded. The music, by the way, they have that what's it called, the iMuse system that they use in this, where the music changes dramatically depending on what's going on. That it sounds like a gimmick, but it works. I thought that was awesome. The music changes, and you're right, the music's off the charts. You could tell they had the full LucasArts like instrumental like gimmick behind this thing. They didn't pull any punches. And if I may go off on an editorial tangent here. This is back when Star Wars was still awesome, and everyone loved all of it, and everyone was happy all the time. And it was glorious. It's not like today where they put out 6 duds and weighed the poor trilogy down with a bunch of luggage and extra garbage that they have to tote around. This was back when it was awesome. So great game.
Well, this took place in the cinematic universe. This was after Empire Strikes Back, but before Return of the Jedi. So it actually fit right into the storyline. One more fun fact about this before we go to user reviews, Aaron. This was available as a demo, and it came on 2 floppy disks, and it was bundled with a Computer Gaming World. what made this demo very unique was before you could play the demo, you had to watch a commercial about the Dodge Neon because they were the one who sponsored the demo. So you put your game in, you fire it up, you've got to watch this advertisement before you can play your game.
That's the way you do it, man. You got to get your word out.
I do want to say one thing. Star Wars is the ultimate in playing as the good guy or the bad guy, because it's not just being a bad guy for bad guy's sake, and it's not just being a good guy because you want everything to go well. There's a dynamic there that really lends itself to being good or bad, and you can be on the rebel side and still be bad, and you can be on the Empire side and still be good, and it all works. And there's no game that is truer than in Star Wars The Old Republic, which that's the MMO. If anyone wants to play in the Star Wars universe, to be a bad guy turning good, or to be a good guy turning bad, or anything in between, I highly recommend checking it out. You can play it for free, and it really does let you get in there and tweak how bad you want to be or how good you want to be. It does it really well. And, I really want to hear the opinion of other people on this. Did we get any Discord reviews?
We sure did, big boy. We got a few here. So
don't
our
call me
good
big
buddy,
boy.
Graham W., Webkey, friend of the show, writes, I'll start off by saying I'm not really a big fan of Star Wars. I know I can feel the barbs and hexing from Australia, and that might give the impression this game is going towards the binary U-bend, but you'd be very wrong. This game is the reason why I can't get a lot of enjoyment from Wing Commander, and even Elite Dangerous struggles to hold my attention. I rebought this on Good Old Games when it was available, and I don't regret it. It's how a space flight / combat simulator should be, and it was almost made 16 years ago. Blech. It was almost made 16 years ago. I'll get it right eventually, Graham. What a technical achievement. The game really does need a joystick, as the mouse play to me is difficult. I've never tried playing this with a mouse. The campaign is now a touch too long, but for its time would have given excellent value for the money. A true classic 9 out of 10. He liked it, Brent.
I agree with absolutely all that. And if he got it off of Good Old Games, he's playing with all the extra missions. With all the extra missions, the game is almost double the original size. Yeah. So that definitely can feel a little long.
Rushi writes, or Roushi, we'll get that right one of these days. I can't be remotely unbiased in my love for this game. It remains incredibly playable today, and despite the shift from rebel fighters to flying eggshells, it felt like it had a more comfortable difficulty curve by not forcing you to complete those secondary and tertiary objectives every mission. The addition of Garan to shading was a visual treat, though I was forced to disable it on my old leading edge to maintain a smooth frame rate. These days I prefer the untextured Garan visuals over even the textured models in later Windows 95 releases. Do yourself a favor and play this, and make sure you get the CD-ROM release. It opens up Super VGA resolutions, has higher quality cinemas, includes the excellent Defender of the Empire expansion, and most importantly, includes final Enemies of the Empire campaign missions, more than doubling the amount of missions in just the base games. Final score timeless. That's a heck of a review for Rushi. And by the way, I agree with him on the quality of the graphics was definitely a step up, and I do also agree that you need to get the CD-ROM version. Lord Soup writes, TIE Fighter. Okay, I have this on Steam, not DOS, but it's awesome nonetheless. I prefer X-Wing as I am no rogue leader, but this does provide a shady joy for siding with the evil galactic empire. He's got that in all caps. It's a classic for a reason, and the X-Wing TIE Fighter games would be prime candidates for HD remixes if I was one pulling this trigger. 9 out of 10. Edit. I do have it on DOS. I got it from Good Old Games. It's TIE versus X-Wing I have on Steam. So there you go. little edit there.
Yep.
We've got one here from our buddy Lobsterminator. I played this a lot last year, and TIE Fighter remains the near-perfect space combat sim. I played it with real hardware and a CH flight stick joystick, just like I did in the 90s, and all I can say is it hasn't aged a bit. I was dodging and bobbing my head during intense fights, just like the old days. From the minimal but well-done 3D graphics to the storytelling to the dynamic Amigos music that changes with the situation, every piece just fits perfectly. Being able to see Star Wars from a new perspective is just the final icing on the cake. It perfected the formula started by X-Wing, 9.5 out of 10. And finally, this was a game that was very well reviewed by our Discord. Our good buddy Chris Foltz writes, a masterpiece for the day. I spent so much time playing and still plays great today. The different perspectives of playing for the dark side is amazing. Recommended grabbing the good old game edition. Wish they would do a remake. 9 out of 10. My God.
Yes.
This was one of the most popular games we've ever looked at in terms of the people in the chat, the people in Discord. They loved it. Loved this game. So I'd say you picked a winner there, Brenny. Well done.
Absolutely. And if this game has no value of its older editions, unlike some games we've reviewed in the past, you can pick this up today. Good old games, Steam. Like I said, Steam, it's on sale if you're watching this live or the day of release. It's on sale for $4. You owe it to yourself. Treat yourself. Go get this game. Enjoy it.
I got to agree. When you pick this one, first of all, it's a great choice. And secondly, this is a winner. A winner. If you're into space combat at all, is it my favorite space combat game of all time? No. That would probably be Descent Free Space. I really like that. But this one was, for the time, blew the doors off the computer. And the space combat in this is silky smooth. Definitely improved on X-Wing in almost in fact, I'd say in every way. In fact, I think I like this more than X-Wing versus TIE Fighter just because of the story. I think I really like this one a lot. So it's an excellent choice. So, with that in mind, we'll move along. When we got this category of playing the bad guy, I had a game that just leaped into my mind immediately. Immediately, Brent. A game that shows you that being the bad guy can be fun, joyous. And that game, of course, is Rampage. Rampage, the classic...
Absolutely.
The classic arcade game. Now, I wanted to look... it's funny, we looked at Rampage, me and the boat, on the Coco, of all things, last year. And the Coco port of this was very good, and it even allowed 3 players. So I wanted to look at what's considered like the ultimate home port of this in a lot of ways. And when you look around, and I also just happened to own this version, but the people often consider the ultimate port of this game the Master System port. And you can see right here, I can sort of zoom it in. I can put it right there behind the simulated cartridge. This is the Rampage box. I've actually owned the box. If you've never seen a Master System game, these are great. They're hard. They're sort of like the Sega Genesis games, and they open up. They've got a little place to hold the cartridge, as you can see there, and they've got the book in here. I love it. They've even got little things to hold the book. The Master System was an awesome system. It's awesome to collect for too, Brent, because these things they built to last, and people kept their boxes.
Yep, no paper boxes there.
You got that right, buddy. You got that. That's absolutely correct, sir. So, before we get too far into Rampage, the game from Sega, the Mega Drive game, let's talk about the arcade game, Brenny, a little bit. Rampage, the arcade game, came out way back in '86 by Bally Midway. It's a game where you sort of turn the tables on the conventional gameplay. Instead of a Donkey Kong where you're taking on the giant gorilla to try to save the girl, in this one you are the giant gorilla and his 2 buddies, as they rampage through multiple cities, laying waste to everything they see in a glorious path of destruction that you wrought on these poor, unsuspecting towns. The arcade version of this had 3 simultaneous players, which is something else that made it awesome, because it let you team up with your buddies. Your 3 characters were George, the giant gorilla. You also had Lizzie, who was a Godzilla-type creature, and then you had the oddly named Ralph, the giant werewolf. I don't know if there's a subtext to his name. I thought that was strange. And in the arcade version of this, you find yourself like in these different cities, and your job is to climb up and down buildings and smash them into rubble and punch your way through them and eat anyone you see. Eat people, smash cars, bridges, taxi cabs, police cars, tanks, whatever you see, airplanes, helicopters. It is a lot of fun. It's funny, I was doing some research on this game. In the arcade, there's 128 days of cities, and actually, you can actually go to every state, but there's only a few states that aren't represented in this. So get this, Brent, I didn't know this. In the arcade, the only states that don't have cities in the game are Connecticut, Delaware, Mississippi, New Hampshire, Rhode Island, South Carolina, and Vermont. So even apparently West Virginia is in there if you play it long enough.
I can only assume it goes to Charleston to cover 2 states.
Who could say? Because if you think about the cities you start in are real kind of obscure cities. You start in Peoria, Illinois, and end in Plano, Illinois. So I don't know why. I don't know what the reasoning was behind that. Once you play all those cities, it cycles again. You can cycle through 5 times. And when after you play the arcade 768 days, the game resets back to day 1. And they talk to the guy who wrote the game. It was like, listen, we never in our wildest dreams thought people would try to get anything after level 768. So, and really, no one should ever do that, man. So, the funny thing is, when they made this game, the guys that made it, that were a guy named, the lead artists were Brian Collin, and the programmer was Jeff Nauman, and neither one of them liked arcade games. So they said, make a game, and so they wanted a game where there was no objective and you couldn't really lose, and that there was and you could do whatever you want, and so this is what they came up with. It's just a game where you just run around crushing stuff, and they're right. I mean, you can eventually run out of energy, but effectively, there's no right or wrong way to play the game. You could beat up your buddies. You could beat up whoever you want. You can do whatever you want. One of the reasons that the game was like it was is because they were limited on what shapes they could put in the game. I thought this was interesting. They had the technical limitations, so the city sort of had to look the same. They had to have the same sort of rectangular building because there were limitations of the hardware they were using, which I thought that was bizarre. After this game came out initially, they added more levels to it, which I also didn't know that. And they also made the game more. They made the game more difficult. So I thought that was interesting. So in the little pictures that appear in the game of the different people, those are actually people that were actually working on the game. Colin put himself as George, his wife as Lizzie, and the other guy, Nauman, as Ralph. Those were the programmers and artists, which I thought that was kind of neat. When they promoted this game, they went around the malls and they would put up signs and stuff that said, "This city is slated for destruction." And then they would bring.
Wow!
I thought that was cool. So they actually got behind this game. I don't know if this game was very popular when it was being worked on, but it became wildly successful. And it was one of those games that's sort of ageless and timeless. You could always, one of the first games me and the kid played was Rampage, because he could just give him the joystick and just let him run around like an idiot and do whatever he wants. It's a good part of the game. It's very free worldy. This game was the first of a ton of sequels. In fact, I'd never heard of some of these, Brent. Rampage 2 Universal Tour, Rampage Through Time, Rampage Puzzle Attack, Rampage Total Destruction. Hey, don't look at me. This game's popularity was such that they actually filmed a movie called Rampage starring The Rock. You remember that? It just came out a few years ago. I don't think it did too good, Brenny. But
I think the game was more widely accepted.
Yeah. So let's talk about the actual Rampage on the Master System. Now, I've got the like I said, I've got the box here. Now, in the arcade, it's funny. Different versions of this game got different amounts of cities. So on the back of this game, it says "Smash and Trash with 2 mega power, mass destruction has never been so much fun." And arcade superstars Ralph the Wolf, George the Ape, and Lizzie the Lizard make a riotous wrecking crew. So go wild! Crunch the concrete, trash a trolley, smack on a soldier. That's a real nice thing to put on your box. Smack on a soldier. Have an office building for lunch. Go on a rampage. And then here's something I found interesting. This one says 50 cities to destroy. So you've got less than half of the arcade cities. But let's face facts. The cities are pretty much mostly the same, with some slight additions. And I will say on Rampage World Tour, they made the cities a little more unique. And have you played that one at all?
Yes, yeah. I have. Yeah.
And that's a great sequel to this. But this game has a unique charm to it, just because of, like I said, it was something really new and different. So the Master System actually does a pretty good job with this game, Brenny. All the characters are represented. You can pick whichever character you want. Of course, you've only got 2 players in this instead of 3. That's not too bad. Really, there weren't. I think, with the exception of the Coco, I'm not sure if there were any systems that had 3-player support that I couldn't find any. But I didn't look super hard into every system. But yeah, this was one that you could that was 2-player. When you go up and down these buildings, punching and destroying the buildings, you will see windows open occasionally, and stuff will pop out, like soldiers throwing dynamite at you or shooting at you. Occasionally a woman will pop out, or a dude, and you can grab them and eat them. Now, I will say one of the big changes in this game is that, number one, there's not in the arcade game, there's way more there's way more objects to grab. Yeah. I mean, tons and tons of stuff. This one, I noticed right away that it seems like it was a lot more limited on what pops up. And the arcade stuff pops up like when you break up in buildings, just crazy stuff, light bulbs and toilets and sinks, all different types of people. In this one, it seems to be, for the most part, it seems to be either people, soldiers, and just very rarely an occasional thing like a sink. It's a little harder to differentiate what you're looking at when you break these buildings open. They do a good job. It does have backgrounds, which not all the versions of this have. And by backgrounds, I mean like in the back of of the destructible area, you'll have silhouetted buildings that let you know that there's more city out there that you can go out and go out and wreck. The sound on this is pretty good. The tunes are okay. They do a pretty decent job of capturing the audible way that the monsters get hit with dynamite and run around and destroy stuff. The sounds are pretty solid, I thought. Again, this is the Master System, but as an arcade port, I thought they got that part down pretty well. In the arcade, the cities will vary occasionally. With some cities will have bridges. Some cities will be on a coast or on a lake that you can go across. This has that stuff as well. Something I think's funny is when you get killed in these games, your guy reverts to human form and is naked, and you have to cover yourself up as you kind of walk off. And I like it I like when that happens when you're near water, because even your little naked guy will go under the water and keep going off the screen, and you can just see his little head or a hand pop up over the water as he's walking through, which I always thought was funny. Something else that's great is, in 2-player mode, if you're playing with your buddy, you can attack your buddy ad nauseum. You can beat the crap out of him. But something else you can do is when your buddy gets killed and he loses all of his energy and becomes a human, you can go eat him.
Yes.
And you can do that in this too. I always thought that was super funny. this game is not without its shortcomings. I would say for me the biggest shortcoming, Britt, and I'll be interested to hear if you had this problem, was actually climbing buildings, just timing when to push up. In the arcade, it's pretty smooth transition when you go from building to building. You just you get near the edge of a building and you push up. In this, you really had to practice timing when to push up, and so it made it a lot harder to actually get anything done. Because what happens is if you're milling around the city for too long, eventually soldiers come out with dynamite packs and they put them in front of the buildings and just blow the whole building up. And when that happens, you don't get the points. You know, you lose out on a lot of points and a lot of fun. And when that happens, it's usually because you took too long. You know, they move these levels along, and so when all the buildings are gone, that's when the level ends. And so you know that was kind of a bummer. Did you have any control issues with controlling these guys, getting them up and down buildings?
I did in the very beginning.
Yeah.
And I did find myself jumping to grab a hold of buildings was way easier. But I did eventually find the sweet spot, what the game was looking for. And after that, I was able to go all the way on top of buildings and then down the other side, which I was having a lot of difficulty with. I think that overall, I think the controls are actually pretty good. I just think you have to find that sweet spot. And it is more difficult to do than the arcade, but I don't think it is overly difficult. I don't think it negatively affects the game.
I will say, if you've ever played with an authentic Master System, the controls for it are kind of small, aren't they, Brent?
Yeah, they're small pad,
and they're sort of NES-like, but they're smaller. They're good controllers. Don't get me wrong. In fact, I find them easier to hold than NES controllers, just because their NES controllers are they're not huge, but they're big enough to where they fill your hands up, and they make it just hard for me. My hands get tired holding them. Have you ever had that problem with those? I know you played a ton of NES.
It's been a long time since I've played with a system for long enough for that to have happened.
Well, on the NES, that used to happen to me a lot. So I find the Master System controllers a lot easier to hold. So, but I actually had played this with Genesis controls, and that I don't know if that is part of the reason, but for me it was just like Brent said, it took some practice, and I never perfected it, but I got good enough to where I was less annoyed. But I hate when I run out of time and I can't blow something up. It drives me nuts. This also has the bits where you can get electrocuted if you try to punch an electric sign or a light. You also can if you try to eat someone who's carrying dynamite or a bomb, your guy will get sick. You can lose energy any number of ways: falling off buildings, getting shot by tanks or jets, or anybody that has a machine gun. You can still jump up and blow away helicopters, which is always good for a laugh. Like I said, for the most part, they kept most of the standard stuff that was in here. And having looked over a lot of the different versions of this one, of Rampage, this one is graphically, certainly, is probably the best of the bunch, if not in the top couple. It's, in fact, one thing I noticed, though, looking at Rampage, is how many horrible versions there are of this, Brent. Why was this game so hard to port?
I think a lot of people tried to port this to systems that couldn't support it. But this version is incredibly good. It's not perfect. In the original arcade versions, the way you got the power-ups from the buildings was to punch open windows.
Yeah.
In this game, in this version, almost all the windows are open, and that rule doesn't apply. The other difference I found is when the tank shoots you with a shell, you don't get bounced back. You just kind of take it, which, I mean, in the arcade, it was really annoying because to chase at a tank took effort.
Yeah.
Because you kept getting pushed back.
You had to sort of jump in on the tank and hope it wasn't going to shoot you, because if it did, it'd blow you halfway across the screen. You're right.
Now, I really like busting the windows open and getting the goodies inside, because the fruits and the water water fixtures and the televisions and stuff. I've always thought that was good fun. And you can actually hit the signs and the electrical stuff as long as the electricity is off. And the sign, this is one of the only versions I'm aware of that actually has that differences, where the sign is on which means you'll get electrocuted if you hit it, and the sign turns off, which means you can get the points if you hit it. The attention to detail and stuff like that was absolutely phenomenal.
You know, when I was doing research for this, I was looking at the arcade game. The sheer amount of stuff that you could pick up in the arcade game, you wouldn't believe me. I mean, it's unbelievable
off the charts.
The amount of stuff they put in there. And I've played that game for years and didn't know what it did or what it was. And there's even like each character, I didn't realize this in the arcade, can actually pick up. There's one person each character can pick up and carry around. Like, and each one has a different guy or chick.
Yeah, George picks up the girl. Yeah. I know that one.
But I mean, the sheer amount of stuff that you can collect is unbelievable. If this version has a shortcoming, that's what it is. It's the fact that there's very little, and let's face facts, all of them have many, many shortcomings. So for that to be the one, that's not too bad. But that does take some of the fun away when you can't get all the goodies.
The other problem I have with this is it will not let you punch the first floor of a building.
Yeah, that's true. You can't actually, you sort of have to work your way. You can't even diagonally punch it. Which is,
right.
I guess there's a graphical limitation there.
And it's okay once you accept it. Accept that's how it is. You just stop trying to do it.
Yeah, I mean, that is a play mechanic that's a little bit different. But I mean, they pretty much, I'll have to say, they pretty much nailed most of the other mechanics. And like I said, graphically, they did a really good job. I will say one thing that's missing also is, in the arcade, in between levels, there's sort of this like a ticker, like a news ticker that comes by that tells you what city you're in. It kind of flies. This one, it just tells you the city in big bold letters. I think I'm used to the other one, but this one's okay.
Oh yeah.
But it does. This one gives you it tells you the city, and there are, like I said, there are differences between the cities, but they're pretty minor for the most part. But I mean, the bridges and stuff work the same way. You can jump on them, go in the water. You can go through the water.
And break the bridges. I was really impressed by that.
And of course, you've got your trolley. You can whack it back and forth, which is cool.
The manhole, when someone peeks out of the manhole, you can actually hit it and make the manhole fly out.
So they put in a lot of little things. I like the ability to just. I'll tell you one thing I always like is when the businessman falls out of the building and he takes off with his briefcase. You can run down and grab him. You can still do that. So they kept some of the stuff in, but and of course the buildings don't get quite as tall. I think there's maybe a floor or two less, but for the most part, a fun game.
Absolutely, yeah. This was a really good pick too. I definitely thought about it because you're definitely being the bad guy. Yeah. I'm interested to hear what Discord has to say about this when we get to that. Because I wonder how they feel about this versus the TIE Fighter game. Such different games this week. Yeah, different types of play.
I should mention that this came out in '89 in the U.S. In fact, across the world it came out in '89, except for Australia. They got an '88 according to this. That's crazy. How'd they get the jump? Now get this, Brent. You knew this game had been widely distributed, but get this. You could get this for the Amiga, the Amstrad, the Apple II, which bad. The Atari 2600, dude. The Atari 7800, the Atari computers, the ST, the C64. There's a DOS version, a Lynx version. I believe the Lynx version is the one that adds like a fourth guy. Did you know that? Huh. They actually came up with another monster and added it because I guess you could have 4-player games. The NES, which the NES version of this is surprisingly bad.
It is. It's not nearly as good.
We mentioned the Coco version, which is surprisingly awesome, and the Spectrum got ported. So this thing got well ported. I like the fact that you got everything in here from the Apple II all the way up to the Amiga, and everything in between. That's a pretty wide berth. I should mention that this was developed by the Sega Master System, their in-house team worked on this. This game reviewed pretty well. The Game Freaks went back and looked at it, gave it an 85. Computer and Video Games back in the day gave this an 81, which, again, these scores are a little low in my opinion.
I think they're low.
The Games Machine gave this a 58. Their big thing was the price. They said £25 was too much to pay for this game.
That's insane.
Well, That's what they did, you know. So hey, you can't make everybody happy. I looked this up on the eBay. If you want to pick a copy of this up, I was hoping it was worth a ton of money. I could cash out, Brent, with my copy here. But sadly, if I could actually turn the page here in my notes, it was not worth a ton of cash. 25 to 40 bucks complete. So right here, you're looking at 25 to 40 bucks complete. Or you can get the loose cart for a tenner, $10 US. Not hard to get. But again, I recommend collecting for the Master System. Number one, the Master System's pretty awesome. They've got a bunch of crazy games. And secondly, the cases and stuff are amongst my favorites. We got some Discord action on this. We got a lot of Discord action this week, actually. Graham writes in, your timing in choosing this game is uncanny, as I only recently introduced my youngest daughter to the arcade version of the game, and she loves it. Only the Tandy Coco version comes close to the Master System port, which is the definitive home port of Rampage, so he agrees. It includes all three characters, unlike the NES version, which doesn't include Ralph. How do you leave off Ralph, Brent? The sounds are great, and I find the controls are as good as the arcade version. Only the occasional graphical flicker, glitch, and two-player mode spoils this from being a perfect 10. It's mindless fun, which some people might feel eventually gets a little repetitive, but it's in my 6 of the best Master System game list for a reason. 9 out of 10. He loved it. He was a big fan of that one. Chris Folds also chimed in. One I owned as a kid. This is a cracking conversion of the arcade classic with bright, colorful graphics and gameplay way beyond the expectations of the system. The only thing that lets this down is the game itself. It does get a bit repetitive over time and doesn't have the replay value for me, but an excellent port, 8 out of 10. So they chimed in and pretty much agree with us on this one, Brenny. I was pleasantly surprised. It's funny, I've owned this for a while, but I'm not sure I'd ever played it until this week, and I really enjoyed it. But of course, like I said, if you just let Rampage be Rampage, you're good to go.
Yeah, this is definitely one that, unlike TIE Fighter for me, which was a go out and buy this game, it's that good. I think this is if you have the capability of emulating this, you should go and find the way to emulate this. And if you see this in the store for one of the better systems, I certainly think this is a game actually good enough to pick up, Aaron.
Yeah, and if you've got a Master System, this should be on your must-buy list, in my opinion.
Absolutely.
And by the way, go get a Master System. Speaking of a Master System, we have a Master System in place for choosing games, Brent. You know what that's called. It's the freaking wheel.
Oh, all right.
Here it comes, big boy. Now, this week we added a couple darlings here. First, in our retro rewind, we've got the VIC-20. Ooh, everybody likes the VIC, Brent. And then to replace Chat Choice from last week, we've got Bizarro Spin. So if that comes up, we'll let Brent explain it to you. Let me get this thing in line here. I always have to hold this thing like a bazooka. All right, are you ready, Brent? You ready?
Your suffering amuses me.
You ready to go? Here we go.
Let's do it.
And the winner is Final Retail Release. Final Retail Release. Brent, tell the people what that means.
Okay,
people,
this is pick any system or computer, and this is the final game that was released for it. Now, this final commercial release, homebrew releases later do not count. So this is a final released game for a system or computer.
This is going to be tricky because, for example, the PlayStation 1 and 2 had releases probably decades after they passed.
It has to be commercial releases.
What's that?
It has to be commercial. It has to be a commercial release.
Right, I mean,
it can't
there were commercial releases for systems that came out well after the system was dead. You know, so we're gonna be sort of loose on that in terms of if they release something 15 years later, we're okay with picking one.
That doesn't count.
That's going to require an amount of research, Brent, to determine.
Yes.
This should be interesting. The last commercial release, and I think I might compile a system or a document together that kind of shows some other system's last release, and we could chat about it. That might be kind of fun.
Absolutely.
Let's take care of a little bit of business here. I want to, and I've got it here somewhere, I want to once again tout our contest over on the Coco show to win this. It's Gunstar, y'all. Gunstar, the brilliant game from Nick Marentes for the TRS-80 Card Computer 3. We're giving this away, sealed copy. And this includes not only the game, but also includes several of his other games, one of which he's actually enhanced for coolness factor, Brent. This is the definitive scrolling shoot 'em up on the Coco. This was a Coco 3 game. It also works in an emulator. Sealed copy. How do you get this? Easy. It's easy. All you've got to do is
break into Aaron's house.
Come to my house if you can take me in combat, and I don't think you can. But an easier way is if just simply leave the Coco Show an iTunes review, and we're going to go through all the iTunes reviews and just pick out randomly pick a winner, and the winner will be shipped this anywhere in the known world. Brent, we'll ship this out free goodie. Even if you don't have a Coco, this is a rare item that is sure to go up in value exponentially. Disclaimer, not sure to go up in value. But
you can play it on an emulator, so there's no reason not to try to get it.
That's right. And Nick is a tremendous programmer, and he did a great job on this. Plus, as an added bonus, in the loosest fashion imaginable, I was involved. Let's show that off. Me, look, playtester Aaron Dowdy. There it is. Screw you and your Battlefield crap, Brent, or whatever that game was. That's the real credit. Brent, what else we got? Do you want to say anything about Anchor.fm, where we host our shows?
Yeah, that is the home of all of the ARG Presents episodes. If you ever want to go back to the back catalog and give it a listen, just go to Anchor.fm/ARG-Presents. And you can listen to any of our past episodes. And that is the home of just ARG Presents. We also are on the Amigo Retro Gaming channel, which hosts all of the podcasts. But if you're just looking for ARG action, that's your fastest way to get there.
That's right. And we appreciate that people are Anchor. I like having all our shows available all the time. That way I can go back and listen to some of the early shows and cry a little and die a little inside. But I think that's pretty much all we've got. Brad, you got any more bits you want to say hi to the chat while we're here?
Yeah, let's say hi to people in chat. We've got Hermsky just came in. We got Lobstinator, Picard, Paul Kitching.
Just say it.
Mitsonama, or I just like to call him Mitz because I'm really bad at pronouncing stuff. Duncan Styles. We got Challenged Moose. Amiga Bang, of course, made an appearance for us today. Frodo was in chat. And tons and tons of others.
Good crowd.
It was a real good turnout today.
Good crowd today. So
my loving wife was in chat.
Of course. We appreciate everyone for stopping by. And we hope you'll join us next week. We shoot ARG Presents live every Sunday at 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, USA, West Virginia time. And hopefully next week, Brent, less rain would be what I'm hoping for. Less rain. Although I did have my first cookout of the year yesterday, so you can't have it every day. So it worked out. Out pretty good. So next week, the last game, retail release on the system. Should be a lot of fun. Please join us next week. And until then, the bar is closed.
ARG would like to take a moment to thank their wonderful supporters: Anthony Jarvis, John Schaller, Terry Howard, and Graham W. Vedke. Would you like to become an ARG supporter and help keep ARG spinning? You can do so at anchor.fm/ARG-presents. Supporters are read out loud and get their name animated in all future ending credits. It's our way of giving a little more for folks giving a little more. Don't want to explain another monthly credit card transaction? No problem. You could always help ARG Presents by sharing our podcast link, leaving us a positive review, or just keeping tuning in. It all helps us grow. We'd also like to thank all of our podcast listeners, all of our Twitch followers, and all of our YouTube subscribers. Without all of you, spinning that wheel and making that deal wouldn't be nearly as fun.